Hey, how are you?
Good. How you doing?
Good.
Let me go and get this mic on you, sir.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
This is hey. Greetings.
Yeah, the puppy.
Yeah, that's fine. Wherever you can poke it into is fine. Let me know when you're ready. We'll try to do this before the storm comes all the way in here.
We're good on our end.
You guys all good? Okay, my name is Chris Magnus. I'm the police chief here in Tucson. This is Chuck Bryan, our fire chief. And I'm going to do my best to give you what is at this point very preliminary information about an extraordinarily complex series of incidents that happened this afternoon starting at about 3:45. So at 3:45, the fire department, Tucson Fire, was dispatched to a structure fire located in the 2100 block of East Irene Street. It's actually East Irene Vista. And pretty much proximate to that same time, an AMR ambulance was staged over at the Quincy Douglas Park, which is very nearby to this location, for a completely unrelated medical call. Now, so there's going to be a couple of things going on at the same time which are confusing. So we'll start with now what happened over at the park. So a male arrives in a silver SUV, basically gets out, approaches the ambulance and opens fire on the ambulance through the driver's side window, striking the driver, who's one of the EMTs, in the head, and the passenger in the arm and chest. One of the EMTs in that rig is able to call for emergency assistance and provide the basic description of the suspect and the vehicle that he leaves the scene in. I should mention that the EMT that was struck in the head is in extremely critical condition at Banner Hospital, and the other EMT on the passenger side is in stable condition. So now we switch back to the scene on Irene Vista, where a few moments later we have multiple TFD engine companies arriving at the scene to start the fire suppression. And as they arrive, there are also a couple of neighbors from somewhere on the block, I guess across the street or nearby, who are also trying to be of help, and they're approaching this same house as the fire department. At this point, the suspect arrives on the scene and starts firing at both the fire department personnel and the neighbors. So just a moment later, the fire department calls for emergency police assistance. We call it a 1099, and indicate that they were being shot at. Officers respond to the area. I'm going to just take a step back here. So one of the firefighters is in fact struck in the arm. He is in good condition. And one of the neighbors is shot in the head, and he is deceased. Another neighbor has a bullet that grazes him, but he's okay. So now we have officers responding to the area, and at this point, as one of the officers drives up the street here, and he's an 8-year veteran, he sees the suspect vehicle, the suspect in his vehicle sees him. The suspect attempts to ram the officer basically near Campbell and Irene Vista. He rams the vehicle, disabling the police car. The officer starts to get out. The suspect opens fire on the officer. The officer returns fire, striking the suspect. So, at this point, and I agree this is extremely complicated, we have several victims here. And I'll just give you the basics. And again, this is preliminary information. We have a 17-year TFD, in other words, 17-year Tucson Fire Department captain who has a minor injury. We have an AMR EMT who is in very critical condition. He's 20 years old. We have another AMR EMT who is in stable condition. She is 21 years old. We have a neighbor at the scene who was located, as I said, outside the house when they arrived. I don't have an age for him, but he's deceased. I'm sorry, he's 44 years old, deceased. And we have another neighbor who sustained, as I said, this, the bullet basically brushed by his head, so he's in good condition. And then finally, we have an unknown victim inside the house where the fire was going on, who is deceased. We don't know the sex of that individual or that person's relationship to the suspect. All we know is that that person inside the house is deceased and badly burned. We also have the 35-year-old male suspect who is in very critical condition at Banner Hospital as well. Now, the one other even more complicating factor here is there are either 2 or 3 children associated with this residence. And at this point, their whereabouts are unknown. So one of the things we're asking potentially from a family member or friend of the individuals over at this location is if anybody knows the whereabouts of the children, they should either call 911 or 88 Crime with that information as soon as possible. So as it relates to the officer involved shooting, the officer is an 8-year veteran who was involved in this shooting. He is assigned to Operations Division South, so obviously we are investigating that part of the incident as well. So I realize, as I said, this is both a highly tragic, really horrific incident with many unknowns at this time that's going to involve a lengthy and complex investigation, because when you think about it again, there are 3 crime scenes here. There is the residence on Irene, there is the park over here, Quincy Douglas Park, and then there is the intersection on Campbell just behind us, where the officer was rammed and the gunfire went on between the suspect and the officer. So I think that's really the basics of what I can tell you at this time. Unfortunately, we just don't have more information, but as it becomes available, we'll make you aware of it. I don't know, Chief, if you wanted to add anything.
No, just our crews, when they arrived on the scene, as Chief Magnus mentioned, encountered the gunman opening fire, striking one of our captains. Thankfully, his injuries are minor in nature. and he's expected to make a full recovery. Certainly not anything within the normal realm of experience.
Yeah, this is, as I said, a really horrific incident, and our hearts go out to families that are obviously concerned about their loved ones associated with the more serious injuries. We just don't know anything more to tell you right now. We appreciate your patience here tonight, especially as we have a storm approaching.
Just to go over the timeline one more time, this started at the park, correct?
Well,
and then escalated to Irene Street?
Well, just to be clear, the fire really was the first thing that was reported on Irene Vista. The 2100 block of Irene Vista is where the fire was, and that's where TFD was dispatched to as a structure fire. So that was at 3:46, and then at 3:49 was when the suspect approached the medical personnel in the AMR ambulance at the park. So very, sort of starts there, moves over here, moves to the park, and then moves back.
What was ambulance doing in the park?
The park, as best we understand it now, was basically stationed as a support in case they were needed by TFD for the fire. So, that's not uncommon.
Non-life-threatening injuries?
I'm sorry?
The officer that was hit?
The police officer was not injured. He was shot at and he returned fire. He struck the suspect. The suspect is in critical condition, but the officer is okay. He was not struck.
Is it the same suspect that was in the park shooting and in the house? Same
That is our belief, yes.
So one suspect.
That's our information at this time. Again, everything is still preliminary, but that's our information at this time.
Let's take a 14. I'll have her.
Okay.